and welcome to the Incoming Video Podcast. This is the show that looks back at my favourite historical miniature releases of the last 7 days. This show is looking back at the releases for week ending the 19th of March 2010, and as always, I'm your host Neil Shuck. Well, it's been an interesting week for historical miniatures. Not, I don't think, as bad quality-wise as we've seen in the last couple of weeks, for example, but nothing immensely outstanding. So going into this, I don't think it's been a particularly outstanding week, although the general quality I think is higher. Let's kick off and we'll have a look, and hopefully you'll see something you like. So at number 10 we have the first of a couple of new releases this week from BEF Miniatures. Now this is a company that specialises in early World War II miniatures. My particular favourites are the British releases they've done. I thought it was quite ironic considering, I think either last week or the week before, I was talking about the fact that you didn't see many boys anti-tank rifles around, Musketeer having just released one. And lo and behold, here we have one from BEF. Boys anti-tank team. A shame I haven't got a shot from the other side so we can see the loader, but looking quite a nice model. In addition to that, BEF have also released a Vickers heavy machine gun. I'm not 100% convinced about this particular set of models. I mean, like, for example, the facial expression on the fire of the weapon is a little strange, but I think it's probably going to be a case of these will look better painted up. It'll be interesting to see a painted up miniature of these. But heavy weapons teams, always a useful addition to your particular armies, so it's nice to see these from BEF. Number 9, and we see the first of some new greens from Warlord for their Bolt Action Miniatures range. Here we have some new Waffen SS. There's an NCO, a medic, and then there are several different variations on riflemen. These are basically using the same dolly, just swapping heads and using different headgear. It's quite interesting to see these. I particularly like having the medic involved, as in most OOBs you'll tend to find a medic in the command unit, something that an awful lot of companies actually tend to ignore, which is a little bit annoying at times. And then it's nice to see right at the end you have a guy wearing spectacles. Something just a little bit unusual. Interesting first set of greens. Be nice to see many more poses, to be honest. So on to number 8, and it's back to BEF and one of their second releases of this week. Here we have the first shots of their new Matilda 2 light infantry tank. For a lot of people, this is, I think, one of their favourite British tanks of the war. As you can see, this particular model has a rear, I think it's something like a skid plate or something like that. Basically, it was put in place in order to help the tank cross trenches, which is what the British were expecting to fight in the Second World War, especially at least the early parts. So, an interesting little vehicle this. As I say, a lot of people's favourite tank, Matilda, and it's nice to see what looks to be an excellent version on the market. Number 7, I must admit I wondered about whether I'd be putting this release in historicals or whether I'd be putting it in fantasy. This is a new release from a new company, Hinterland Miniatures. As you see, this is a female dressed in an hussar uniform. Now, the uniform itself is actually historically accurate, well, although it's had a couple of embellishments. It's based on the Lieb Hussaren uniform, which was worn by Princess Victoria Louise of Prussia. And the idea behind this particular miniature is to start off sculpting a range of female hussars. Now, this figure is sculpted by Paul Hicks, the man who appears to be getting everywhere at the moment. And I think you'd agree, it's an excellent miniature. But, as I say, there is a question mark over whether it's actually an historical miniature or whether it actually more fits in with something like VSF, which is something actually that the manufacturer themselves mention. So it will be very interesting to see how this range develops in the near future. But on the strength of this, I think it's got possibilities. Number 6, and we have a new release from Khurasan Miniatures. These are additions to, I suppose, what could almost be deemed their signature range. These are their Khurasanian line. These are a range of new Kyrian Cowboy. Now, I must admit, I don't know an awful lot about this particular period. My own initial impressions are generally pretty good. I mean, they look, I've always been on the whole impressed with Khurasan's cavalry. As far as the actual horses themselves are concerned, I think the sculpts are very limited. And indeed, this has always been the biggest bugbear I've had with Khurasan's cavalry ranges up until this point. The Militants themselves as a whole look alright, but there is a distinct lack of variety in the horses. And I think this is something that they seriously need to look at and address. And a lot of these Central Asian armies do tend to be heavily cavalry based. You need the variety. And from what I've seen so far, the variety simply isn't there. So, decent release from Khurasan, but as I say, lacking in several areas. At number 5, we have a new release from Incoming Castings. Now, I think I featured a preview of this set of releases several weeks ago now. But the new range is now available to buy for the first time from Incoming Castings. There's a 28mm range, and it's based on counterinsurgency operations by the British in Malaya during the 50s. This is part of a bigger range that Incoming are putting together, all to do with counterinsurgency operations, which is something that seems to be becoming very popular, especially since the release of the Ambush Alley rule set. And I think, on the whole, this is a pretty decent release. Here we have 4 sets of British troops, plus a couple of more native trackers. And then we have 3 sets of terrorists. Interesting set of sculpts in the case of we seem to be heading down non-heroic scale 28mm figures. So the anatomy is much more as you'd expect from a figure, as opposed to the big beefed up heroic sci-fi and fantasy side of things, which is always a good thing in my opinion. And whilst detailing on the whole looks okay, I think the facial features especially look a little rough. So personally, I'd really like to see these miniatures in the flesh before I made a final decision whether to buy them or not. Number 4, and we have more releases for Matilda Militants British Napoleonic range. Here we see new releases of infantry in Belgic shakos, both regular and light infantry, and then we also have 2 releases of riflemen. Although I've only featured one picture of riflemen here, as when I look close on the website, the British rifleman and the picture they have of the KGL rifleman actually looks exactly the same. They're decent enough figures in 10mm, but they're not as good, in my opinion, as the equivalent range from Baccus. Baccus' 6mm resculpts are amazing, and when you put them side by side, these simply just don't compare that well. That said, they're nice enough 10mm figures. So if 10mm is your scale, as opposed to 6mm, then these are decent enough, I think. Talking about Baccus, number 3, we finally have the release of their Hittite range. They've gone away and completely resculpted these, and the results, I think you'd agree, are fantastic for the scale. I've featured some of them before, but here we have some more of the Hittite light infantry, the light cavalry, and then we've got a couple of examples of their chariots, although a couple of the pictures don't really do the models justice, I don't think, which is actually quite unusual for Peter. However, for me, the highlight of the release from Baccus this week have been a picture of their resculpted Scutari. Now, I've got their old Scutari because they're used in the Marian Roman army lists, and I'm now feeling pig sick because the models I've got are still in the bags, they're not painted, and these are so much better. They've done a really fantastic job of resculpting these figures, and considering it's 6mm, the detailing now is just fantastic. Great stuff from Baccus. So number 2, and a new release from Black Scorpion. Along with all the pirates they've released this week, there's been one historical figure, this particular one, which is of Lieutenant Bromhead. Now, again, if you'll allow me a little bit of latitude, since Bromhead is portrayed here potentially not as the historical figure that he was, but moreover as how he was portrayed at the start of the film Zulu by Michael Caine. So you see him here with a cape and a fly swat, and this particular pose has come in for a lot of stick. A lot of people have asked why on earth are they releasing a sculpt of Bromhead in this particular pose, instead of something which is a lot more dynamic and suitable for battle. And people have got a point, I think. So I think this is a great sculpt for a command vignette. However, I don't think it's something that will be particularly useful for a skirmish game, for example. All that said, it's a really good sculpt. I think it's a nice mini. Which leads me to number 1. I'm really pleased this came along. A new release from Legio Heroica, addition to their Muslim range. And here we see a catapult with crew. Looking at this, some people say, well, a lot of the joy in this is in the painting. But obviously the detail's got to be there for the painting to bring it out in the first place. I think this is a stunning miniature. Great crew figures, I seriously think this is by far the best thing that's come out this week. Really impressed with this war machine. I said before, Legio Heroica, every time I see their miniatures, they continue to impress me with just their sheer quality of work. Another excellent release. Just before we go, I'd like to say thank you to Bill at the Miniatures page, Zach at Tabletop Gaming News. Thank you very much for watching. Happy gaming. Take care. I'll see you next week. Bye.